Matthew here from fiberglasssupply.com. In this video, we ran out to Chris Bauer's shop in Port Angeles, Washington, and he ran us through how he does a Freelap bottom lam on a longboard surfboard. So we're gonna show you the video we took while we were out there and provide a little bit of commentary on the process. So enjoy the video and have a great day. Thanks. So the first thing Chris is gonna do here is he's gonna blow the dust off the blank. And as he's blowing that down, he's looking for little spots of dirt, or if it's a dark wood stringer, trying to get all the sawdust out of there. Once that blank's blown down, he's gonna move it over into the glassing area. The reason he's doing that in two different areas is you really do want to keep your glassing area as clean as possible and as dust free as possible. So in the other room where he was blowing that down, there's ventilation to pull that dusty air out and away from the glassing area. First thing he's gonna do here is he's gonna cut a piece of glass for the fin patch. And if you watch here, he's doing a couple of things. He folds that so he has a crease on the center line, and then he's going to cut an angle into that so that there's not a hard stress riser like there would be if the glass was cut straight across. So now he drops that into place, and we'll very carefully trim that out to shape right at the edge of the board. So he's cutting that carefully right around there. Sometimes you can use lead weights to hold that down, like soft bag weights, or if you're pretty good, you can just go for it. One of the keys to getting nice cut lines is to have sharp scissors. We like the all metal scissors because you can clean those off in acetone and get anything that gets on them off of them, and you can resharpen them and keep them in top shape. So now he's stretched out the bottom lam. It'll be one single layer of 6-ounce glass, and he's just checking that to make sure it's nice and straight and the fibers are all parallel to the stringer and not got a wave in them. And he'll pull that down and cut it off, leaving an inch or two, about 2 inches of overhang at the end there. This is 6-ounce fiberglass, so it actually weighs about 5.6 ounces per square yard. It's the standard 6-ounce fiberglass cloth used in surfboard construction. E-glass is what it's often referred to. So here he's cutting the lap. What the lap is it's the bit of fiberglass that hangs down and goes onto the other side, or laps onto the other side of the board, hence the reason it's called a lap. In this case, he's doing a free lap, so there's no tape line or anything on the other side of the board. He's just going to lap that up, and he's going to need to do a clean enough job that when he goes to clean it up, he doesn't sand it the blank or cause any other damage. So he's being real careful here to get a nice, clean, even cut. If you notice how he holds the scissors, that helps him guide them so that he gets nice cuts, no fraying, no random strands of fiberglass hanging down. He's just trimmed off his waist there, and he's keeping part of that for use in fin patches or other areas. So he'll come all the way around, trying to get a nice even cut right there, and trying to keep that pretty short so it only laps onto the other side by about an inch. The longer you make that lap, the harder it's going to be to laminate that up there. Here at the tail, he's cutting some relief darts. Those will allow him to fold the tail laps over without having big lumps or protrusions. So once he's got those darts cut in the tail, he'll also move up to the nose and cut a couple darts up there. Actually, one dart in this case. Here he's lightly dragging his thumb, or carefully dragging his thumbnail down the stringer of the board. That's going to allow him to roll that glass back up and give him a reference point to unroll it. He's doing this so that he can place his logo under the glass. Logos are typically printed on rice paper and laminated on the bottom layer under the first layer of glass against the foam, and depending on the builder on the deck, they usually laminate it in between layers. If you're doing a tinted board, it'll get laminated after the lamination's done. So it doesn't get laminated at this point, it gets laminated at a different step. Making sure the measure is catalyst here and mix it thoroughly into the resin. This is 2880 surf resin. It's specially designed for surfboards. Once he's got that mixed up, the fun begins. So up until this point, you can stop, you can pause, you can double check everything, but once your resin's catalyzed and you've started to work with it, there's no turning back. So to get that logo down there, he's going to get a little bit of resin on the board and then carefully work the logo into that and work the excess resin out from underneath it. And then once he's happy with that, he'll roll that glass back in place. And as he does that, he's keeping an eye on that mark he put in the glass earlier to make sure it rolls right where he wants it to. Just kind of double check it, tweak it, and we're off and running. First thing he's going to do here is he's going to spread resin out across the bottom of the board. He's not pushing this resin hard. He's not pushing that resin into the fiberglass. He's just spreading that out so that it can soak into the glass and nature can take its course and really self-saturate and self-laminate. So he just wants to move that around. Again, using light pressure, mostly keeping it on the bottom of the board and giving it some time to saturate into the glass before he'll come back and pull out any excess. So he's going to work that around, let it saturate in, and then start working some off of the rails and getting that lap saturated out. So you can see there in that last stroke on the bottom, he worked up a bunch of resin along the squeegee and then pulled that over onto the lap and has wet that out. Again, he's going to do that for the center section here. And if you watch carefully, what he'll do is he will wet along that lap, but he's always kind of working from the center towards the tail or from the center towards the nose. You don't want to work from the nose to the center or from the tail to the center. That will just cause you a headache. And here he goes. This is all real time. This is not sped up or slowed down at all. So this is how fast he's working the squeegee. So now that it's had some time to saturate out, he's just going to go back and forth on the board here, and he's going to pull the excess out of the lam or out of the laminate. And now he's going to come over to the other side and start working that rail as well. So he needs a little bit more out of the bucket there, and now he's starting to pull that resin down off the board and over the rail. Get that saturated out. So it's got some areas that drips came down, and what'll tend to happen is the resin, if you have drips, the resin will tend to run along those drips and not wet out. So that's why he grabbed it with his hand and kind of pulled the resin down there. That is a pretty advanced technique or a pretty tricky technique, so don't be surprised if you try to do that your first couple times. It may make a mess of things. Again, he's got some dry areas there in the middle of the lap, and so he just poured some resin on the board. He worked those over, and he's just going to continue working that out and making sure that he has resin completely flowing down the laps there. You notice there's still some puddling in the board, in the center of the board. He's not worried about that at this point. He knows it's there, and before he's done, he will come back and take care of that. As he squeegees, he's also listening, so watching for bubbles and listening for bubbles. And once you aren't hearing them, it's an indicator that they're getting worked out. So again, working that excess resin off the center of the board, out towards the rails. And now he's going to start putting that lap up. So using a long stroke from the center of the board out towards the tail and then out towards the nose. That kind of pushes also towards the center of the board. So if I could describe that maybe a little bit better, he's going lengthwise but also a little bit towards the middle, and that helps wrap that glass up and around the edge nice and tight. So again, on this side, he really hasn't worked all the resin out yet, so he's doing a little bit more squeegee work to get that resin pulled over to the rails. And and get the excess running down the rails, where then he can lap those up and work the excess off. Really something else to watch. This is super cool. So there we go. He's starting to work this side up, pace up the middle, and then works from the middle towards the nose again while pushing towards the center of the board, towards the center line of the board. Working that around, getting it up, and same thing again. He's going to come from the center of the board towards the tail and flip that lap up. Really going a lot towards the tail with a little bit of direction or angling the squeegee so the cloth will go towards the center line of the board. But what that does is any strands hanging down there or anything like that, it will help get those up, but not push them out into the center of the board where they then become a problem later on. And he'll just come around and flip the tail laps up there and check on those. And that's an area, you know, the tail laps and the nose are areas that you need to double check and keep an eye on throughout the process. So he's poured a little bit of extra resin on the middle of the board, and he's just going over it one more time before he does his final cleanup of the laps. This is just to make sure all the air is out, that the weave is saturated appropriately. And he'll check the fin patch area where there's 2 layers. It does tend to be a little trickier, a little more difficult to get both layers wet out at the same time. So he's going to double check that area, but then again, he's just taking a little bit extra resin down there and making sure everything's wet out and that all the air bubbles are worked out. Once he's got that, he's going to come over and clean the laps up. He wants to make sure the laps are down nice and tight and there's no air in there. So a couple things to that. One is making sure they were saturated with enough resin, because unlike the bottom of the board, you really can't add more resin easily and work that. So that's why he wet that out real thoroughly. And now he's just going to work down it and get that up nice and tight and make sure there's no air in there and get off all the drips. So a couple key things on the laps. You definitely don't want any drips because those will have to be sanded out or dealt with before you do the top lam, or there will be problems. And you want to make sure there's no air in there. So you want to get it down nice and tight and go over that and make sure all the drips are off. This can often take quite a bit of time. But the more you do it, the better you get and the easier it goes. The other thing that he's going to do while he's down here getting the laps up is he's going to look for drips of resin that we already talked about. He's also going to look for strands of fiberglass that have come loose, and he's going to either make sure that he pulls those out or works them over to the edge of the lap so that when he goes to grind the lap, they come off easily and he's not having to grind a hard fiberglass strand that's surrounded by a bunch of soft foam. So you can see the drips there, and he's about to work all those drips off and get that lap down nice and tight. And as we come around the tail here, he's going to run into a couple strands of fiberglass that are sticking out and hanging it way out there on the board. And he's just going to tease those over. You can leave them and cut them off later like that, or you can squeegee them over so they're right parallel with that lap line and easy to blend in when you prep for the top lam. So just one more check on everything, checking that fin patch, seeing if there's any air in it. It looks really good. I did not touch the board there. I'll just point that out. I was putting my hand near it to see if it was exotherming yet, as the resin was starting to gel. But everything looks really good. Chris is just taking a look for any drips, puddles, strands, or anything that might be left on there. And that is a wrap right there.
And there's your pre-lap, kids.